Since ancient times, people have been trying to predict what will cause the world to end, and when. The most prominent predictions have become popular because of Hollywood movies or through religious fright, such as the Mormon belief that the second coming of Jesus Christ will bring about the end of the universe. However, until now, there has not been a purely scientific theory that explains how and when the world will end. So today, here are Unexplained Mysteries. We'll be taking a look at 3 artificial intelligence breakthroughs and predictions. The MIT supercomputer prediction. Scientists and mathematicians at the prestigious university, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, have introduced a supercomputer that can make dire predictions about the fate of humanity and the Earth. The computer was developed in 1973 by a computer science commissioner named J. Forrester. Forrester worked with the Club of Rome to create the computer with a mission in mind. The Club of Rome is an organization built of great thinkers, scientists, and political advocates whose goal is to promote understanding of the global challenges facing humanity and to propose solutions through scientific analysis, communication, and advocacy. Alarmingly, the supercomputer predicted that man would face the end of the world in a year as near as 2040. The supercomputer predicted this by tracking variables such as human pollution, depletion of natural resources, abundance of non-renewable resources, quality of life, and more. The tracking started in 1990, when scientists had a good idea of how life was operating in terms of human detriment to the planet. Using these trends in human behavior and seeing how this behavior has a direct effect on the health of Earth and its inhabitants, the computer is able to make statistical predictions on how the Earth will look if these behaviors and tendencies aren't stopped. Climate and environmental activists are increasingly alarmed by this prediction because they're seeing that, so far, many of the variables and predicted trends are coming true. The computer predicted that by 2020, the climate would be in a crucial state and that humans would have to make dramatic change to our way of life at this point in time. Scientists and climate activists suggest that we cut down tremendously on our use of non-renewable resources. There have already been dramatic changes to consumption that have never become popularized before. For example, millennials and Gen Z are increasingly using renewable and biodegradable materials for their everyday items, like toothbrushes, which are now made from bamboo, reusable water bottles, and recycled clothing that can be thrifted. There's also a huge amount of young people choosing a vegan diet over a carnivorous diet to sustain the farming industry and cut back on the harmful greenhouse gases that come from the maintenance and killing of livestock. It's crucial that humans start changing their normal behaviors in order to save our species and our planet. Although we don't know everything about the Earth we live on, humans have a responsibility to protect the natural habitat from which we derive. Using sustainable materials isn't as difficult as it might sound. Dimming your research into sustainable and recycled products is a small action, which will create a great momentum and progress for a better future. Robot rights and human rights. There's a great debate over whether robots should be allowed to join normal human society. Now more than ever, the existence of humanly capable robots is a prominent issue in both politics and the general debate of morality. Some are used to self-managed directions, such as a vacuum on a floor, while others look and speak like humans, giving the impression that they are indeed human when they're not. Massachusetts Institute of Technology scientist Dr. Kate Darling suggests, just because the robots look like humans when given a silicon face, hair, and facial expression, they still lack the basic motivations that characterize real people as people, such as the ability to feel pain, make choices, and perform self-assessments and possess a sense of morality. Humans learn these things naturally over time, whereas robots are programmed for these things, which is simply a result of another human being doing the coding. The debate of whether a human-looking robot should truly be considered a member of human society came up when Saudi Arabia granted citizenship to a robot named Sophia. The obvious question soon arose, should Sophia have the same rights as a legal citizen? The answer is complicated. Some thinkers believe that rights are attributed to people based on our varying levels of capability. For example, a baby is not given the right to vote because it can't harness the intellectualism that it needs to make an informed voting decision. However, older people can vote because the government has decided that humans have the capability for autonomous thinking at the age of 18. However, an issue like voting in a presidential election uses emotional intelligence. Voting one way over the other requires humans to have a belief system, which typically center around emotionally reactive events in a person's life. Events which robots wouldn't have the emotional capability to react to. So should robots be allowed the same rights as humans, even though they lack the necessary empathy and emotional capability to utilize such rights? The other side of the argument is that robots outperform humans in so many areas that they should be actually granted more rights. It's true that robots have the ability to perform extremely complicated tasks in an extremely short time period, such as a calculator can solve a math problem in 1 second, whereas a human would take several minutes or more. However, the only reason they're able to do this is because they're completely uninterrupted by emotional or mental obstacles. Clearly, there's pros and cons to being an emotionally capable being. The ultimate goal for robots entering society is that they can be programmed to think and feel like humans. In that case, the law will have to change regarding robot rights, because humans will begin to react to them like fellow peers. This means that robots will be naturally discriminated against, abused and mistreated in all realms of life, and there needs to be legal repercussions for those behaviors to protect the well-being of societal members. Where does it begin and where should it end for robots and their rights? Robots can be deceitful. Growing up, we learn that telling the truth is always better than telling a lie. However, as we get older, we grow to understand that telling a lie in order to protect oneself or the feelings of another might actually be more beneficial than harmful. Scientists ponder the same question of morality when designing robots used for human interaction, as intentionally omitting or misconveying information with the intent of personal gain. Depending on what the robot is being built for, the engineer might want to allow the robot to learn and practice deceitfulness. For example, if the robot is being used as a pawn in a wartime battle, the robot and the country for which it's fighting would benefit from tricking the opposing side and would in theory win the battle. In other instances, robots are used as companions for adults and children. If a child asked their robotic puppy whether they could have a hug and the puppy said no, the product probably wouldn't sell particularly well. Scientists say the key to controlling robot deception is understanding when and why a robot is choosing to be deceitful, and then having the systems in play to deconstruct deceit if it's no longer helpful. However, this can be an extremely difficult task if we want to ultimately create robots that are learning creatures rather than pre-programmed creatures. Tracking learned behaviors of robots can be extremely difficult, similar to trying to understand why a human chooses a certain behavior in terms of understanding their past experiences. Clearly, a robot who learns to lie without its engineer specifically engineering this trait can pose a major threat. One of the proposed methods for controlling the robots after they've learned to see is to condition them not to do it. This ancient method of classical conditioning was proven to work on dogs. This was when Ivan Pavlov, a physiologist, first discovered this. Later, famous psychological studies have proven that classical conditioning also works on humans. If scientists can somehow manage to condition lying out of robots by rewarding them with positive stimuli when they tell the truth, and harming them with negative stimuli when they tell a lie, the robot is likely to never deceive again. A recent study showed 2 robots playing hide and seek with one another, except that one robot was trained to deceive while the other was not. The deceitful robot laid a trail of clues for the truthful robot to follow and ultimately find her. However, the deceitful robot intentionally laid the clues in such a way that would lead the truthful robot to a certain location where she wouldn't be. Instead, the deceitful robot took another path after leaving the clues. This proved that a robot is capable of deceiving another being for its own personal gain. So what do you make of these intelligent breakthroughs and predictions? Various people on social media came forward and said they received something strange in the post. They were described as small packages of scenes. However, officials including the Animal and Plant Health Agency warned people not to plant them. The strangest part about this is that the people who received them hadn't ordered the items, so were confused as to why they were getting them in the post. The only thing that's come to light is that the parcels are from China and have been delivered to various addresses in the United Kingdom and United States. The mystery deepened when officials warned people about planting new seeds and said that if you did receive some, you should report it and dispose of them straight away. The next question on people's minds was, what sort of seeds are they? Were they actually seeds in the first place, or was it something else entirely different? The first thing investigators said was that there was no reason as to why people should be receiving these packages, but on some of them they were labeled as being jewelry, when that wasn't the case. Some suggested that the reason it had this on the packaging was so that it would easily get through customs. This then led to some to suggest that the reason for them being delivered could have a darker meaning, with some theories suggesting this was a type of attack on citizens. And inside the seeds were biological toxins or infectious agents. With everything that's going on, no one was taking any chances. However, one individual that's been labeled a hero by some, though that title is debated, decided to risk planting these seeds. It turns out the majority of these seeds contained herbs like mint. The United States Department of Agriculture said the following in a statement: "We are aware that people from across the country have received mysterious packages of seeds from China." The UK's Animal and Plant Health Agency also came forward with this statement. "Biosecurity is of vital importance, and we have robust checks in place to protect our plants and wildlife, including for online plant sales. We are currently investigating packages of seeds marked as ear buns sent to people in the UK from China. Anyone who has received these seeds should not plant them and instead report them to us. Although, as of right now, it seems that the seeds are in fact just seeds, this doesn't explain why they've been randomly delivered to various people across the planet." Hundreds of these packages have been delivered to people across the United States, with just under 100 cases being reported here in the UK. Some suggested that it may have been a prank, or that the company sending them out mixed up a lot of addresses. After all, various garden centers have been shut down due to everything currently happening around the world, and people could have gone online and ordered seeds as the shops weren't open, but instead of being sent to the correct address, they got sent out to random people. Regardless, there's still ongoing investigations to try and get to the bottom as to why people receive these packages. So what do you make of this? And why do you think hundreds of people randomly receive packages of seeds? All across the world, researchers have discovered incredible megalithic structures. Although they are impressive, they have continued to puzzle engineers and archaeologists in the modern era. Not only are these structures impossible to replicate in current times, but they were seen as monumental and impossible tasks for our ancient ancestors. How they built these structures is widely unknown and has caused a massive stir in the archaeological communities. How could our ancient ancestors build such incredible structures in a time when it was deemed impossible? Various theories have been put forward to try and explain them, but the majority of these are just theories and are still up for debate. However, recently, researchers have announced that one of Stonehenge's mysteries has been solved. Always a major fascination amongst the locals of the area and researchers from around the world, Stonehenge has proven to be quite a mystery to anyone who even attempts to understand its construction and the techniques behind it. What only are the large blocks used so massive that even modern means of construction would fail in regards to establishing Stonehenge? But the sources of the blocks appear to have been carved from hundreds of miles away, which lead many researchers to question the ability of transporting such large stones to the area. To add to this bizarre strangeness of the formation of Stonehenge, it's been discovered that the structure appears to have been built with astonishing precision in its placement and carved creation. The structure appears to be able to be used as a complex calendar and can keep track of time to an incredibly mysterious accurate degree. However, this does insinuate that not only did the ancients have the technology to cut the stones with laser precision, transport the massive logs, lift them with tremendous force and place them with perfect alignment, but that our ancestors also had the ability to make megalithic structures in a very short span of time. This continues to baffle researchers to this day who work to uncover more secrets regarding Stonehenge. such as its weird electromagnetic properties and special materials used in its creation. Others have even argued that the formation of the Great Stonehenge could be direct proof of ancient technologies and extraterrestrial intervention. Researchers and scientists don't agree with this notion, though, and have even said they've unraveled one of its mysteries, and this is where the famous large stones come from. Before this discovery, researchers only knew that the stones had been placed there around 2500 BC. But a new study carried out by researchers at the University of Brighton have announced that they've traced the stones to a woodland close to Wiltshire. It's here that they say the stones originated. And back when the monument was being constructed, this area would have been rich with these large sarsen boulders, the rocks that were used to build Stonehenge. Further studies showed the team that the ancient civilization would have chosen these giant boulders because of their size and how flat they were. This in turn is thought to have helped the prehistoric workers to move the stones. Interestingly, the team said that not only did they use these giant stones for Stonehenge, but they also used them to construct other structures. The team also said that over 1,000 years before Stonehenge was constructed, the giant blocks would have been used to construct a massive local prehistoric tomb. This would have been 4 important individuals in the region. The archaeologists have said it's an exciting discovery, and that now they're trying to work out the route in which the workers took to transport them. Although the team said they made great progress, they still said they want to work out how the workers transported these 15 to 45-ton stones over 15 miles. When looking into the route, though, they said this would have been no easy task, as during some of these trips, these giant boulders would have had to have been hauled up an incline for several hundred meters. As of right now, more study is needed to determine how these ancient workers achieved this. Interestingly, though, those who have looked into Stonehenge have said this more than what meets the eye. For years, an archaeological site of significant importance has always been a major fascination amongst the locals of the area and researchers from around the world, and that location is Stonehenge. And those who've studied the interesting monument have said it's proven to be quite a mystery to anyone who even attempts to try and understand it. When researchers attempted to better understand the strange electromagnetic phenomenon experienced at Stonehenge, they began to put forward a theory when plotting on a map a number of different megalithic monuments. That points to the idea of one long and massive road that seems to have connected the monuments in a straight line. This would later lead to the theory that the spiritual placement of Stonehenge was that of a mystical property, and that this invisible road could have been referenced to a mystical line of energy that ran around the world known as a ley line. Though no one is quite sure that ley lines are responsible for it, it is believed there is a connection with that of the Earth's electromagnetic field, and a property of mystical energy surrounding the entire monument. Ley lines are lines that cut across the Earth spotted with landmarks and historic structures, and convey alongside them flowing Earth energies, and these energies are concentrated at the points the lines meet. The concept behind the lines started with amateur archaeologist and businessman Alfred Watkins in 1921. This is when he realized that ancient sites appear to be lined up with others close by. Drew lines on his map to show that people that lived in Old Britain traveled in a straight line pattern, with major man-made or natural sites falling in this line. In his 1925 book, The Old Straight Track, he suggested that ancient Roman and medieval structures across the globe fall within these straight lines, but his proposal was rejected by experts, and his fault-finders noticed that his faults depended on drawing lines between destinations set up at various times of the past. They additionally contended that in ancient times it was unfeasible to go in a straight line of a bumpy or rugged zones in Britain, rendering his ley lines far-fetched as trade routes. A year later, Watkins' followers started the Straight Line Club, and in 1927 Watkins published a book titled The Ley Line Hunters to help those interested in finding their own ley lines. The New Age movement interest in ley lines started in the 1960s by Earth Mysteries movement, growing from something ordinary to a whole field of study, with more published books, research, and fans, gathering together to dig deeper and find new paths that ley lines led to. Most believe these lines had supernatural powers or mysterious energies, even though Watkins never had that thought in the beginning. Other paranormal subjects have infused the concepts of ley lines to include things like UFOs and Atlantis. Critics to this day feel that until ley lines are proven scientifically, it cannot be taken seriously, as most of the connected lines are mere coincidence. Ley lines remain a mystery, and whether or not they're true, it goes to show man's interest in finding patterns in everything around us. It's interesting to think how far humanity has come in regards to structures. We've built some incredible ones in the modern day, but some of the most impressive and mysterious are those that our ancient ancestors built. Although we step closer to understanding how they did it, sometimes discoveries can throw up more questions than answers. These interesting discoveries and monuments make for interesting conversations. And perhaps one day we'll be able to look back and understand just how they did it. So what do you make of this recent discovery? And how do you think the prehistoric workers were able to get the slabs to the Stonehenge location? Elon Musk has recently tweeted that aliens built the pyramids. For years now, the megalithic structures found in Egypt have been at the center of a wide range of theories, one of which is that the ancient Egyptians had otherworldly help when building the pyramids. This is of course not supported by mainstream scientists and researchers, who say that thousands of years ago humans were able to move these blocks without the use of technology, saying that although some of them weighed as much as 70 or 80 tons, they were able to do it. They cite that brute force was used to get them in the positions they are today, and that with a big enough workforce this was very doable. Elon, however, made the remarks a few days back, and it soon started a massive discussion, which even involved officials from Egypt inviting Elon to see the pyramids for themselves and showing him that they weren't built by aliens. In fact, Rania Ael Mossad, the Minister of International Cooperation of Egypt and former Minister of Tourism, said the following in a tweet. Sarah Parekh also said the following in response to Elon's tweet. Egyptologists hear Elon, who works on a royal pyramid site. They did not, ancient Egyptians did. Plus we have papyri that are like live tweets of pyramid construction at Giza. Happy to share resources so you can get yourself educated. One of the issues people had with this was that they weren't sure whether he was joking or not. Elon is known for his humor and baiting his audience, so many people took this as him just messing around. With one person saying the following, all of the triggered people in this comment section are hilarious. So many people are mad at what Elon just said. It's funny reading some of the replies. But in all seriousness, we all know that aliens built the pyramids. End quote. Others, though, are fully on board with what he's saying and said there's no way humans were able to move the stones in planes. The Great Pyramid is located at the center of the landmass of the Earth. When looking at the pyramids, most will agree that it has 4 sides. However, photographs taken years ago go against this. The centers of the 4 sides are indented with an extraordinary degree of precision. This means that it actually forms an 8-sided pyramid. What's strange, though, is that this can only be observed from the sky. So many people have questioned why you can only see this when you're above the pyramids. What use would that be when they were made thousands of years before flight? Another strange thing is that it's only detectable at dawn and sunset in the spring and autumn. This is when the sun casts shadows on the pyramids. For reference to the stars of the pyramids, each block of the colossal structure weighs roughly 2.5 metrotons, with over 2.3 million blocks making up the entirety of the structure. Not only did this require 315 blocks to be moved in place each day for the next 20 years, but to accomplish a building of this scale and delivering the large stones, some have said it would be a near impossible feat if a stone wall was made to be 2 feet high and 4 inches wide. Using the blocks of the pyramidic geyser, the wall would wrap around the circumference of the entire well. So what do you make of these claims? Do you think Elon was just messing around or being serious? During the early 1970s, a number of government officials came forward that claimed that the United States Central Intelligence Agency was testing experimental drugs on the populace at large under a mysteriously hidden black budget program that was not only being covered up by members of the agency, but was even being covered up through illegal means, as noted by whistleblowers who showed evidence that they were being actively silenced and threatened by those wishing to maintain the secrecy of the program. What was the effect of this black budget program? How long did it last for and who was involved? Today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we will be attempting to answer these questions and bring together the information surrounding this impossible to explain morally bankrupt mass experimentation of the unknowing United States populace. Referred to as the CIA Mind Control Program, according to surviving documents from the Central Intelligence Agency, Project MKUltra was developed for the sole purpose of creating psychoactive drugs that could be used to weaken a person's resolve and, in essence, force them to admit hidden information against their will via the use of mind control or heavy suggestion hypnosis. The project was noted as officially beginning sometime during 1953. It was at this time that the project used a variety of illegal experiments to conduct their research, typically targeting African-American neighborhoods or unknowing persons agreeing to questionable. One of the most notable reports surrounding this illegal experimentation included the experimentation on poor neighborhoods via injections of lysergic acid dithylamide into the water supply. This caused a mass paranoid attack amongst the neighbors and residents of the neighborhood. This experiment led the United States government into purchasing more than 100 million doses of LSD from the Swiss drug company Sandoz Pharmaceuticals in the fear that if the Soviet, they could very easily cause mass panic and paranoid attacks all across the United States. Other such reports come from sex workers who not only claimed they worked alongside the CIA, but were in fact paid to slip high concentrated doses of LSD into the drinks of their clients to gauge their reactions from the men, an action that would cause paranoid outbursts, violent attacks, and terrible assaults that would lead to death of some of those on the drug and those administering the drug. This illegal experimentation was not just limited to United States citizens. However, in recovered documents from the MKUltra program, it was revealed during Senate investigation hearings that the CIA worked in connection with Canadian researcher psychiatrist Donald Ewan Cameron, of whom at the time was working on his psychic driving concept surrounding the psychoactive drug. The researcher believed that by using the experimental MKUltra drugs, he could cure such as schizophrenia by erasing the memories of his patients and reprogramming the psyche, a concept similar to the science fiction novel The Demolished Man that came out several years before Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron's research. Under this theory, Cameron received a substantial amount of doses of the psychoactive drugs and began experimenting on patients who suffered from paranoid delusions. When patients tried to come forward about the illegal testing, however, they were disregarded given their history of mental illness. Such experiments included the doctor's electroconvulsive therapy and power outputs 30 to 40 times the normal power for standard therapy. Additionally, Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron would treat his patients using his driving experiments in which he would induce a 3-month-long coma while playing a recording device of simple, repetitive statements. His work would end up being funded by the CIA from 1957 to 1964. When questioned as to the source of his funding, Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron claimed that he was not aware of the money having originated from the Central Intelligence Agency. Illegal experimentation with the help of trained psychiatrists would not end with just the work of Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron, however, as university professors would begin independent research funded by the MKUltra program, conducting experiments on low self-esteem students of their universities. These illegal university experiments would include the infamous individual Theodore Kaczynski, later known as the Unabomber, of whom would undergo more than 200 hours of illegal psychoactive drug and hypnosis treatment masked under the guise of supposed psychological treatment. After Kaczynski's arrest, following his domestic terrorist actions and countless mail bombings, rather than being given a fair trial that could help bring to light the illegal government experiments conducted on him during his time at university, he would be immediately found guilty and locked up in unending solitary confinement at the highest maximum security prison of the United States. The deputy director of the CIA would later reveal that more than 30 universities and privately held institutions were involved in the extensive testing and experimentation of the MKUltra program, which did not discriminate and included test subjects of all known social levels, high and low, unwitting United States citizens, foreign citizens, and Native American populations. Unfortunately, this would not be the last domestic terrorist to make the news after being the subject of the illegal MKUltra experiments. Sirhan Sirhan, the known assassinator of Robert Kennedy, the brother of John F. Kennedy, would admit that at the moment of his arrest, he had been the victim of a CIA mind control experiment. Sirhan's lawyer would then come forward with the evidence backed by Bernard L. Diamond, a medical professor of psychiatry, who supported the claims that Sirhan was under severe mental deficiency. Despite the evidence and psychological evaluation, Sirhan would be found guilty and sentenced to death by gas chamber in only 6 days, one of the fastest deliverings of death sentences ever known to have occurred in California. Before the 6 days were up, however, The people of the state of California versus Robert Page Anderson banned the use of the death penalty as a violation of the Constitution's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Despite the illegal CIA experiments, MKUltra studies, and psychological research findings left a trail of impossible to dismiss illegal activity. The MKUltra project would continue up until 1973 when several whistleblowers would come forward with information surrounding the project. Unfortunately, next to nothing was uncovered during this time, as the then CIA director Richard Helms quickly ordered that all of the files pertaining to the MKUltra project were to be immediately destroyed that year. This forced all subsequent investigations and Senate hearings to rely solely on gathered witness testimony, and only a handful of surviving documents that were not destroyed under the order of Richard Helms. Despite the limited evidence, a profound amount of information was uncovered surrounding the experiment, as well as the invention of drugs that were later to be used in torture against prisoners of war, into convincing the subjects into willingly confessing and providing all information asked of them. These cases would later be traced to undercover safe houses located in outside countries such as Europe, East Asia, Japan, Germany, the Philippines, and many of the United States allies that would be used to hold prisoners or captured terrorist threats for the purpose of torture, forced interrogation, and illegal testing of the psychoactive drugs that would often end in the death of the test subjects. What many people are not aware of surrounding the MKUltra project, however, is that the purpose of the CIA study was not just to find drugs that would allow for mind control or the ability to efficiently hypnotize a participant against their will. In fact, a discovered CIA document on the MKUltra project back in 1955 details about 17 different goals for the project and the use of mind-altering drugs. Goals number 2 and 7 included the study of drugs that would increase the efficiency of mental ability and perception and enhance the ability of individuals to withstand privation, torture, and coercion during interrogation or brainwashing. Goals number 1, 4, 9, 10, and 17 included the study of drugs that would promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public, promote the intoxicating effects of alcohol, cause the physical symptoms of shock and conduction of extended periods of time, and would produce physical disablement such as paralysis of the legs, acute anemia, and would make it impossible for a person to perform any kind of physical activity. Goals number 3 and 16 were specifically designed for the use of spies in outside countries, with the goal of creating a drug that will cause the victim to either age faster or slower in their maturity and can be administered in a drink, food, cigarette, or aerosol with the purpose of providing maximum amnesia of all events without any permanent damage. Although the official claims surrounding the investigation of the study holds the sentiment that the MKUltra project was completely halted in 1973 after the Senate investigation hearing, there are many that continue to come forward with claims of ongoing MKUltra testing in the modern day. The most notable case seems to be that of the claims surrounding Canadian investigative journalist Elizabeth Nixon, of whom gathered substantial evidence surrounding her mother's participation as a test subject of modern-day MKUltra testing. Conspiracy theory groups have also made a continued number of connections surrounding mass shooters within the United States that had previously undergone therapy sessions and psychiatry that proved to not only exacerbate their violent tendencies but showed no signs of help when it came to their existing mental health problems, with many conspiracy theorists pointing to the idea that perhaps private institutions and therapists across the United of psychoactive drugs. But what do you all think about the MKUltra project? A tweet sent out a few days ago is currently making the rounds on social media, and this is because of the interesting wording that was used. The tweet was made by Tobias Elwind, who is a conservative MP for Palmas East, chair of the House of Commons Defense Select Committee. Tobias tweeted the following: "Congrats to Dame Barbara Woodward, our new ambassador to the UN. She brings formidable experience to the role of, not least from her recent appointment as our ambassador to China. This is a critical time for the UK to push the UN to urgently adapt to the New World Order." Many people quickly picked up on the New World Order and started to question exactly what was meant by this. For those unaware, the New World Order is used by some to describe a one world order in which the elite plan to eliminate freedom from everyday people. And this would be accomplished by dividing people and then enforcing measures. This includes fake attacks, dividing people by playing on their feelings and emotions on certain issues, and even making mass confiscations. The theory has been shared for years and is quite well known. So many were confused as to why this wording was used, with people saying the following, "Excuse my ignorance, but what is the New World Order?" While another said the following, "What exactly is the New World Order and what does this mean? Why is this person using wording like the New World Order? Did this slip out? Or do they not even care anymore? There it is clear as day." It's interesting that they say things like this, but next week it will be forgotten about. We're certainly living in crazy times. With others saying the following, the irony of his tweet is that the New World Order matches current events that's happening around the world, and that's telling the majority of the public that they need to do something for the greater good. Otherwise, something bad will happen. It's censoring people on a mass level. The majority of the comment section was questioning exactly what he meant by the New World Order. Perhaps, though, it was meant literally in that people have to get used to a new world due to current events. 2020 has certainly been an interesting year, with it testing many of us and showing us that although life is incredible, at the same time it's unpredictable. It's not known how long we're going to be in this state, but some researchers have been vocal about the fact that the worst could still be on its way, meaning that we need to learn to adapt to this new world. Others came to debase defense and said that people are reading way too much into this. With one person saying the following, "There's no such thing as the New World Order, and those who believe in it are just bored and looking to create something out of nothing. The government wouldn't harm the public and have done nothing but look out for us over the years. People need to stop hounding our governments as they're doing everything they can. So what do you make of this? And do you think that people are reading too deep into this?" Bridges can be an unsettling experience for some. Walking over heights with water running or foliage underneath and looking down at a height can be very unsettling. So today here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 bridge horrors. Overtown Bridge. There is not a more menacing nickname than Dog Suicide Bridge for any monument, which is why the Overtown Bridge in Scotland has drawn so much media attention. Everyday dog owners cross the bridge on daily walks, but every day they must be extra conscious of where their dog is and what their dog is looking for. Sensing their emotions before crossing the Overtown Bridge threshold could be a matter of life and death. The bridge itself is a massive structure of solid concrete tucked behind dense foliage. It is a beautiful spot for tourists and locals to walk their pets, drink coffee, or simply admire that Scottish atmosphere. The walk over the bridge is short in length, only a few yards, but even in a short distance, the dogs who dare to walk over the bridge seem to be overtaken by a powerful force almost immediately. An estimated 300 dogs have jumped off the Overtown Bridge in search of something beneath. Roughly 50 have died from the plummet. Some of the dog survivors have even returned to the bridge to make another miraculous attempt to jump. What is compelling these dogs to suddenly abandon their owners and leap to their death? There are 2 main explanations. First, the dogs might be instinctively reacting to the overwhelming smells of wildlife below. The dense forestry around the bridge is home to many animals, some of which dogs are known to chase, such as ducks or rodents. However, many owners whose dogs have leapt from the Overtown Bridge report that their dogs have never been interested in chasing wild animals. There is wildlife beneath so many forested bridges in Scotland. Why is it only the Overtown Bridge that drives such strange dog behavior? Other explanations veer on the side of the mythical, have been said to be a thin place, which refers to the pagan belief that heaven and earth have intersected. Locals from the area tend to believe in both explanations. It is said that Scotland is rife with supernatural occurrences and that believing in them is not as outlandish as it would be in the United States or other regions that value practicality so highly. The most common supernatural theory is that the dogs are summoned by the ghost of the mourn the loss of her husband, John White. The White family used to reside in this area of Scotland before the tragic death of John. Residents of the area have even reported seeing the White Lady lurking about the town, mysteriously appearing in windows and doorways. Although not all the dogs who walk across the Overtown Bridge attempt to jump off it, almost all dog owners report their pet freezing or hesitating at the beginning of the path as if they sensed an unpleasant aura. The possibility remained that dogs might be capable of suicide. However, a reputable animal behaviorist, David Sands, affirmed that this was not the case for the dogs fleeing on the Overtown Bridge. David Sands admitted to feeling something eerie as he was investigating the bridge. There has not been an affirmative conclusion as to why so many dogs jump from the Overtown Bridge. Hell's Bridge. Hell's Bridge is not your typical tourist destination. It's not meticulously crafted, not in a particularly beautiful area, and was only made famous for the horrific murders of 7 local children. Hell's Bridge was infamously named after the haunting tale of Elias Frisk. After some children went missing in Algoma, Michigan in the 1800s, parents and town residents hosted a search party for the missing children. To ensure the safety of their own children, they asked local man Elias Frisk to watch over them in the meantime. However, Frisk was not the responsible babysitter they thought he was. Instead, Frisk tied the children to each other using rope and lured them into the woods nearing a flowing creek. Frisk began murdering the 7 children one by one and tossing their bodies into the river. Frisk's crimes were later discovered by the crowd of distraught parents. The townspeople then decided to take punishment into their own hands and hung Elias Frisk over the creek where he discarded the bodies of the children whom he viciously murdered. Not long after his hanging, the rope broke, dropping this body into the river, now renamed Hell's Bridge. Before Frisk was killed, he claimed that his crimes were influenced by the devil and that evil spirits had suddenly compelled him to kill the children. Only the most daring thrill-seekers have visited the area at night since the tale of Elias began circulating Algoma, Michigan in the mid-20th century. These hikers have reported various interactions with the ghost of Elias Frisk, the 7 murdered kids, and even the devil himself. There have been reports of the children's faces appearing just beneath the water's surface begging for help or screaming. These occurrences happen only after midnight when the visitors stand on the bridge itself. However, some people are skeptical that the story of Elias Frisk actually happened. According to the census, the Frisk name had not appeared in the Algoma area until 1910, over 100 years after the murders were said to have taken place. Of course, many accounting mistakes were made this early in history, but alas, there is no concrete evidence that these murders actually happened. Because the murders and Elias Frisk himself might only be an urban myth, how can we be sure that people are really experiencing these frightening experiences with the devil? And with deceased children at Hell's Bridge, is it only a product of their imagination, or their preconceived notions of the terrifying and tragic events that might have occurred there? The Old Alton Bridge. Texas has a rich all-American history concerning slavery and Southern life. The legend of the Old Alton Bridge is a testament to this history, as the ghost of a former black farmer haunts this iron truss span. The Old Alton Bridge is beautifully and historically constructed for foot traffic connecting Denton, Texas to Copper Canyon. It hovers over a muggy river and is surrounded by luscious green trees and grass. It was originally crafted to bring horses and cars to the other side of the river, but it is now unsuitable for modern vehicles. A nearby bridge was built to allow bigger rigs to pass through instead. However, its beauty doesn't match its dreadful history. The bridge has been nicknamed Goatman's Bridge, after a successful black goat farmer. Oscar Washburn was killed by the Ku Klux Klan in 1938. The Washburn family resided in the area in the early 1930s and was generally left alone and even respected by the rest of the community. They were a prosperous family as they raised healthy resale goats that were necessary for farming at the time. Because the Ku Klux Klan ran rampant in Texas and other southern states, it was very dangerous for black people to be successful either financially or socially in the early 20th century. The KKK got wind of the Washburn family's success because of a promotional sign hung the Old Alton Bridge and were enraged. One night in 1938, the Klansmen raced across the bridge to drag Oscar from his home and bring him to the Old Alton Bridge to be hanged. They wrapped a noose around his neck and hung him from the iron bridge over the water for the entire community to see. The legend remarks that the Klansmen went back for the rest of the Washburn family but murdered them in their home rather than lynching them alongside Oscar. Although lynching was a common method of disposal for Confederates at the time, nobody could have predicted what was going to happen next. When the clansmen went to see if Washburn was truly dead, his body had disappeared without a trace. Visitors and residents of the area claim that Oscar Washburn's ghost still haunts the old Alton Bridge. Visiting the bridge at night has brought all sorts of outlandish stories to light. Some people have reported seeing a man standing at the other side of the bridge, holding goats' heads underneath his arms, or even a half-man, half-goat figure staring back at them. Others have reported more subtle incidents of their car doors locking and unlocking unprompted. Even if visitors don't see the goatman himself, they have reported seeing red glowing eyes in the distance. Tourists and visitors have concluded that knocking on the bridge 3 times at night summons the ghost of Oscar Washburn immediately. What do you make of these bridge horrors and the stories behind them? Time travel has been an obsession for people over the years. Everyone from scientists to filmmakers have wondered if it was possible, and what it would be like if it really happened. Even the physicist Stephen Hawking argued that time travel was something we couldn't rule out. Although no concrete evidence has been found to prove that time travel is possible, many experts are still extremely optimistic, and will likely remain this way until proven otherwise. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 pieces of evidence that could prove that time travel exists. Ron Mallett, an astrophysicist named Ron Mallett, has dedicated a large portion of his life to studying the possibility of time travel. His interest in time travel began when he was just 10 years old and his father passed away after suffering from a heart attack. A year after his father's death, Mallett discovered the book, The Time Traveler, by H.G. Wells, and his life was changed forever. After becoming a professor, Mallett began sharing his ideas of time travel and realized many people were just as curious as he was about the idea. This motivated him to continue his research. Mallett has determined several scientific equations and principles, and he now believes that not only is it possible to travel back in time, but that he could even build a time machine to make it happen. According to a theory by Albert Einstein, objects that are large can bend space-time, and time goes by slower as gravity gets stronger. Based on this theory, Mallett believes you could do more than just bend space, but that you can twist it. He believes that anything that can be done to space can be done to time as well. Mallett has come up with a theory, claiming that time can be twisted into a loop that would make time travel possible. He built his own prototype that shows how one could use lasers to achieve success. Mallett has said that studying ring lasers and their effects on gravity could help him figure out how to make a time machine based on a light that circulates. This light beam would, potentially, twist time and space and allow someone to travel to the past. Mallett also believes that if this light is twisted in just the right way, traveling to the future could be possible as well. Mallett's peers have been very hesitant about his theories and find it hard to believe that he'll achieve his goals. An astrophysicist named Paul Sutter believes there's far too many flaws in Mallett's theory, and that it doesn't seem practical. Some other scientists believe that whilst his ideas may not be particularly practical, experimenting with them may be worthwhile. Mallett himself admits his theory has its flaws and doesn't seem achievable at this point in time. He has acknowledged the fact that time travel likely won't be possible within his lifetime, but he's trying to raise money to perform experiments. Regardless of the negative opinions of others, Mallett remains optimistic. He is glad that his work will contribute to the study of time travel, and he considers it a great tribute to his father. The Cronovisa in the 1960s, a Roman Catholic monk named Friar Marcello Anetti met another monk named Friar Francois Brun on a ferry ride in Venice. During the ferry ride, they discussed their own biblical interpretations, but Father Anetti said something that surprised Father Brun. He said that he doesn't see the need for theories and interpretations when they have the ability to see the truth themselves. Father Anetti claimed that there was a machine that could show them what really happened during the biblical days. Father Anetti told Father Brun about a time-viewing machine named a chronovisor, which looked similar to a television that allowed people to see and hear things that happened in the past. He said it finds noises and sights that were still floating about space. Father Anetti even claimed he had watched Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed and the crucifixion of Jesus. Years before this, whilst working with Father Agostino Garnelli on filtering the harmonics from chants, they somehow heard the voice of Father Garnelli's father speaking through the wire recording, even though he'd already passed. After this, Father Anetti couldn't help but wonder what happened to noises and sights from the past. He put together a secret team of scientists to help him figure this out. The only two scientists ever to be named were Werner von Braun and Enrico Fermi. This secret team built the Chronovisa in the 1950s. It allowed them to see and hear any time and place that ever existed. Not only did they claim to have watched Jesus Christ, but also Napoleon, along with plays by a famous Roman author. The team agreed to dismantle the device after realizing how powerful it could be in the wrong hands. No moment could ever be completely private if they could see and hear any moment in time. They also believed that if the wrong person got hold of the machine, this person could become the worst dictator to ever exist. Father Anetti was often asked for proof of his machine. He had transcribed a claim and offered it as proof only to certain people. He also had a picture of Christ that he had taken a photograph of through the chronovisor. The picture shows Christ looking up while he was on the cross. However, both pieces of evidence were eventually criticized. Experts believe the transcript of the play was too short to be a full play, as most would have been at least 10 times longer than what Father Anetti had transcribed. He also included many Latin words that weren't used until around 200 years after the play. The play also seemed to be written by someone who didn't know Latin particularly well, even though it was the playwriter's supposed native language, leaving many to believe Father Anetti made it all up. People also noticed that the picture of Christ was the same as the pictures sold on postcards at Sanctuary of Merciful Love in Italy. The final piece of evidence that disproved the story was a letter from an anonymous relative. The relative claimed that, while on his deathbed, Father Anetti admitted he had faked his previous piece of evidence. He said he made up his own transcription of the play, and that the photograph of Christ really was the copy from the postcard sold. He still insisted that the chronovisor was real, and that he really did see the events he previously claimed to see. Father Anetti never told anyone how the chronovisor was made or exactly how it worked, so there was never any tangible evidence. Although most people always believed he was lying, Father Bruin believed him. He believed that since the photos of Christ sold in the church in Sanctuary of Merciful Love were based on the description of a vision a nun had of Christ, both photos could have been accurate. He also said that if Father Anetti really made this confession before dying, he may have done so because he was threatened by the Vatican. Even though Father Anetti claims the team dismantled the Chronovisa, some people believe it's still hidden away somewhere and will likely always remain a secret. Wormholes. Wormholes were first theorized as a mathematical solution for Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity. Wormholes are described as areas where space and time are bent to manipulate the distance. Wormholes bend the fabric of space-time and connect two distant points in space, acting as a shortcut. Because they act as shortcuts in space-time, some scientists believe it would make it possible to travel back in time. The idea of wormholes really existing is intriguing to most people, but no one's ever found one, and it's believed that no one will find one anytime soon. Scientists have also found several problems with this theory, such as size and stability. It's believed that wormholes, if real, only exist on microscopic levels, but it's possible that some could stretch out to a larger size. It's also believed that wormholes could easily and quickly collapse because the gravity would change when someone entered. The prevailing theory is that an exotic matter, which may not exist, would be needed to help keep it stable. If it did exist and a wormhole could contain this matter, it could be used to send information or even people through space. However, many scientists don't believe the laws of physics would allow a human to travel through a wormhole. Although there's currently no real evidence that wormholes exist, or that they'd be useful if they did, scientists still continue to study this. And due to the fact that the wormhole theory shows up so often in calculations, many scientists believe they must be real. It's also possible that as scientists continue to learn more about gravity, it could develop new ideas about wormholes. The hope is that a better understanding of gravity will provide new ideas about how wormholes could be feasible without using exotic matter for stability. So what do you make of these time travel possibilities? Looking through old photographs can trigger a variety of emotions. For most people, they can bring back happy memories or remind them of loved ones or friends. However, it's not uncommon for people to find strange things in the background of photographs. The majority of these turn out to be funny, but for some they leave the individual with more questions than answers. This is exactly what happened with this girl. There's not much information about this photograph, but it's reported by several websites that she uploaded the photos to social media. After a few days, though, people started to speculate about what was in the upper right corner. After zooming in, it appears there is a creepy apparition. Some have described it as looking like a doll, while others went down the route of it being a child. Although this may seem vague, over the years, many people have come forward with creepy photographs showing apparitions in the background, and the individual in the photograph is usually left creeped out as to how it got there in the first place. One person who saw the photograph said the following: "This photograph instantly gave me chills, because I have one similar to it that was taken when I was a child. As with most parents, my mom used to always take photographs of me and my sister. On one occasion, we'd gone out to visit my grandma who lives out in the countryside. Used to live in this old converted barn, and it was one of those places that you wouldn't be surprised if you found out it was haunted. While visiting grandma's, we'd always have our photographs taken. It wasn't until years later, though, when me and my sister were looking back at the photographs that we noticed something creepy. In the background was what looks like the ghost of a small girl. The eerie thing about the photograph was that you could clearly see the outline of a girl. When asking my grandma about it, years later she would go on to say that every so often she would hear giggling at the bottom of the stairs. But when she went to investigate, she would never see anything. Me and my sister speculate that because the bomb was old, the little girl may have lived there many years ago, and perhaps she never left. It's photographs like this that have led to the idea that perhaps these entities are able to make themselves known well after they've passed. Not only have they been picked up in photographs, but believers in the paranormal have said that apparitions are able to interact with humans. Whether this is by getting someone's attention, moving objects around a house, or in rare cases causing harm. Paranormal researchers have gone on to study this phenomena and have given it different names. However, most researchers can agree there's different levels of hauntings that one can experience. One of the most common ones that's reported from around the world is that of a residual haunting. This is described as an event that gets played over and over again. For example, if someone hears the same whispers or screams, or seeing an entity walk up and down the same flight of stairs, this can be described as a residual haunting. Going on to say that the entity is living the event over and over, and this can be witnessed in the living world. Additionally, this has caused some to suggest that something dark took place in the region, and now that event has left an imprint that gets played over and over. Other examples of a residual haunting include that of something making banging noises, or turning on the same light over and over. Although this may sound creepy, residual hauntings is actually one of the better hauntings to experience. According to paranormal researchers, these entities will let you know when they're there, but they'll usually stay out of your way. There's a dark entity that's allegedly been plaguing the human race since recorded history, and this entity goes by many names. For many years, a number of people all around the world have reported waking up at night and seeing a mysterious shadowy figure. This shadowy figure has over time become famous, leading on to it being given a variety of different names, some of which include the Shadow Man, the Hat Man, and the Shadow Person. The phenomenon has gained widespread popularity, and a number of different documentaries have been made on the subject, trying to get to the bottom of what people are experiencing. However, it seems the more the subject is looked into, the more questions are put forward. A dedicated blog known as the Hat Man Project has been launched where people share their experiences with the Hat Man. The history of the Hat Man phenomenon goes way back in time, with different written records of the Hat Man being found. In fact, some evidence of the Hatman-like entity have been found in scriptures of previous civilizations as well, showcasing that whatever this thing is, it's been plaguing humanity for a long time. The Canadian Inuit people refer to this entity as Ukkurpinurnik. This mysterious entity is known to paralyze humans with fear, and it seems to suck the breath right out of them. While scientific studies have found a phenomenon known as sleep paralysis, they fail to explain the appearance of the shadowy figure. According to one theory, humans are most vulnerable when they're asleep. And when they're suffering from sleep paralysis, their brain plays a little trick where they believe that someone is ready to harm them. However, there's no scientific evidence to support this theory. Some people believe that the Hat Man is actually their own spirit that appears as a shadowy figure. They claim that when we're asleep, our spirit leaves our body. And sometimes when we suddenly wake up in the middle of the night, our spirit has not yet returned to the body, and what we actually see as the Hat Man is our own spirit that's about to return to the body. As soon as the spirit returns to the body, the sleep paralysis is over, and the Hat Man figure also disappears. However, some people believe that the Hat Man is actually a mysterious paranormal entity that has haunted human beings for years, and continues to do so in the present day. They believe that the Hat Man tries its best to paralyze a person and even take their life. However, when it fails to do so, the person lives to tell the tale. Those who have become victims of this paranormal entity have no way of telling their story as they've already passed away from the experience. One recent paranormal entity that's been reported all around the world is that of the Black Stick Men. People have described seeing very thin humanoids that are similar to shadow people. These entities are said to be able to move through walls and can even vanish in the blink of an eye. They appear to be two-dimensional, and their appearance always looks the same no matter what angle they're seen at. Their heights vary. Some have said these entities are 5 foot tall, while others have reported them as being over 7 feet tall. They are usually encountered around places that have a dark history. For example, asylums or abandoned hospitals. Witnesses often claim that while encountering these beings, they feel a strange urge of aggression. Some have put forward the idea that these beings give off a form of negative energy. They're unlike ghosts in that they're not linked with any particular paranormal incident or location. They simply appear, and in recent times they've been appearing more and more often. Although they sound similar to the shadow people, they're thought to be different. Shadow people have often been reported as being more humanized, whereas the stick men are more alien-like, in that they're thin and have elongated heads. What's interesting is that no eyewitnesses has heard these entities making any noise. It's said they observe you, then they simply vanish. Those who have looked into these alleged beings have said it could be a case of pareidolia, as the majority of these encounters happen during the night, so people's minds could be playing tricks on them. Although the majority of the photographs circling the web have been deemed as hoax-ins, people continue to report these mysterious creatures. As of right now, paranormal researchers stand by the fact that these entities are ill, but what they can't agree on is why people experience different things. Some say that all shadow people do is observe them from a distance, while others have told stories about being pinned down by them, and that after this event has played out, they experience nightmares for the next few weeks. As of today, it seems that we're now closer to understanding this mystery. So what do you make of this photograph? And do you think it shows something mysterious? Also, have you had any experiences with the paranormal? It's a tragedy most of us were made familiar with at a young age during our early school years, the sinking of the unsinkable RMS Titanic after a collision with an iceberg. This occurred on April 15, 1912, during a voyage that was supposed to stretch from Southampton, England to New York City. Only 705 people escape, joining the ship's fate in the cold Atlantic waters. These survivors waited in the ocean on lifeboats, rafts, and debris for an hour and a half before they were rescued by the RMS Carpathia, a ship that picked up on the Titanic's distress signal. The other passengers, approximately 1,500 people, didn't survive this disaster, partially due to an inadequate number of lifeboats. Although the tragedy of the Titanic is widely known, many people are only aware of the basic details. In fact, due to widely spread fictional interpretations of the Titanic, such as the movie by that name, some people are more familiar with imaginary information about the ship than they are with its reality. In the spirit of proving that within this disaster, there were just as many intriguing stories to read about as there were passengers on the ship. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 stories about the Titanic. A message in the bottle. During a life-threatening event like the sinking of the Titanic, panic sets in for the victims. Human instinct urges us to focus intensely on finding a route to safety in any situation where we fear for our lives. Still, there's also a moment of acceptance in certain tragedies, where victims realize the fight won't change their circumstances and attempt to reach out to their families and say goodbye before their inevitable death occurs. However, as the Titanic sailed far before the invention of cell phones, the victims didn't possess the technology to quickly communicate with people not nearby, meaning the goodbyes of passengers separated from their families would have to be said in thoughts or prayers, leading to less closure for the surviving relatives. One young man, however, named Jeremiah Burke, was able to find a way around this problem and send out his goodbyes in a tangible way during his final moments. Jeremiah was 19 years old when he stepped foot on the Titanic, accompanied by his 18-year-old cousin Nora. Unfortunately, neither him nor his cousin would survive the disaster that the ship was unknowingly sailing towards. Burke had purchased his spot so he could join his sisters, who had moved away from him and his family in Ireland, to a home in Boston. During his send-off, he received a small bottle of holy water from his mother as a parting gift. It was this bottle that gave Burke the opportunity to deliver a final message to his loved ones. He uncorked the bottle, poured the water out, and slipped a note inside before throwing it overboard. The note, which was tied with a shoelace, read, "From Titanic, goodbye all, Burke of Glanmire, Cork." Over a year later, a man walking his dog on the rocky beach of Dunkettle Island discovered the bottle washed up. 400 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, Burke's bottle ended up being found remarkably close to his family's home in Ireland. Unfortunately, Burke's mother didn't live long enough to witness the discovery of his message, but other members of his family were able to verify it was the same bottle Burke's mother had given him before his departure. Since 2011, the bottle and method have been on display at a heritage center in County Hopefully. The miraculous finding of Burke's message provided closure for his family. Survivor reveals there was a fire on the Titanic. You were likely taught the Titanic sank following an iceberg collision. But do you know the full story? Titanic survivor John Dilley revealed shortly after the disaster there was a fire on the ship, and later research suggested that it could have played a major role in the accident. John Dilley was born in London in 1883. He worked as a stoker and went aboard the Titanic to tend the furnace for a monthly wage. He and 11 other firemen were instructed to control the coal bunker fire that was burning in the boiler room 6 of the ship, even though these types of fires are extremely difficult to manage. He recounted this experience to the Stevens Point Journal 2 weeks after he survived the Titanic sinking. According to his report, the fire started in bunker number 6. There were hundreds of tons of coal stored there. The coal on top of the bunker was wet, as all the coal should have been, but down at the bottom of the bunker, the coal was dry. The coal at the bottom of the bunker took fire and smoldered for days. The wet coal on top kept the flames from coming through, but down in the bottom of the bunker, the flames were raging. The stokers were beginning to get alarmed over it, but the officers told them to keep their mouths shut. They didn't want to alarm the passengers after all. The coal fire on board the Titanic actually started during speed trials 10 days before its scheduled departure. However, the Titanic still left its docking point with its passengers as planned. The ship's firemen were not able to get the fire under control during the trip, so they planned to empty the coal bunker after their arrival in New York and call for the help of fireboats. However, they never got this opportunity, and the iceberg would ultimately be the one to empty Bunker 6. The bunker was situated right above the largest hole the iceberg tore in the ship. But just because the iceberg did the final damage to the ship and directly caused it to sink, doesn't mean the fire on board didn't have an effect. The fire was estimated to be 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. This was predicted by Guillermo Rain, a fire science expert at the Imperial College of London. Thanks to the intense heat from the fire, the hull of the ship, which includes the bottoms, sides, and deck, may have been damaged long before it struck the iceberg, making it more vulnerable and susceptible to further destruction. An Irish journalist who studied the Titanic for over 30 years found evidence of this through his investigation of photos taken of the ship before it even began its journey. He discovered 30-foot-long black marks on the hull right at the spot that would eventually be impacted by the iceberg. Engineers at the Imperial College of London were able to connect the mark to the raging coal fire. Another way the fire may have escalated the collision was through its influence on the ship's speed. The Titanic was operating at full pace when it hit the iceberg, above the recommendations for the conditions. Stokers may well have been shoveling as much coal as possible in the furnace to light the fire, which could have caused the engines to work harder, leading to the increase in speed. The extra momentum would have made evading the iceberg far more difficult, and it also would have increased the force of the impact. The fire may have also sped up the sinking process. Even though the iceberg struck the hull, the Titanic designer, who was aboard the ship, believed the bulkhead, the protective wall inside the hull, would hold the water back. However, this had been damaged in the fire, which may have shortened the time it took for the water to flood in. While it's likely the iceberg would have sunk the ship even without the prior harm, it's also probable that with less fire damage, it would have held up for longer. In that case, we might have seen a less devastating fatality rate on the Titanic. If the ship had stayed afloat for just a few hours later, the passengers wouldn't have had to flee the ship before the rescue boat came in. While these theories can give us an idea how the Titanic would have fared without fire damage, it's something we'll never know for sure. As for our brave survivor John Dilley, who originally came forward with this information, he continued to serve as a fireman. In 1922, Dilley was aboard another ship, where he died at the age of 39 after an accidental coal bunker explosion killed him and several other crew members. He was therefore buried at sea. Rigel, the heroic dog, the Titanic contained many heroes who either helped rescue others or sacrificed their lives by giving up seats on the lifeboats. Supposedly among these heroes was a black Newfoundland dog. This dog, who was named Rigel, was said to have saved the lives of some of the people on board at the Titanic. Rigel was thought to have been owned by William McMaster Murdoch. The first officer of the Murdoch didn't survive the sinking, but Rigel was able to swim away and started to circle one of the lifeboats. When the rescue boat arrived to rescue survivors, Rigel's lifeboat drifted under the front hull of the ship, known as the bow, putting them in danger of being run down. The people inside the lifeboat were far too exhausted to alert the ship, but because of this, everybody in that lifeboat was rescued and Rigel survived too. Rigel was then allegedly adopted by one of the rescue boat's crew and was taken to Scotland, where he enjoyed a long life. The fact that no survivors mention Rigel in their accounts casts some doubt over whether all the details of this story are true. There's no hard proof that Rigel ever actually existed, but his story was reported in the New York Herald on April 21, 1912, based on information provided by a man claiming to be his new owner. People have also questioned if a dog can even survive in the cold North Atlantic water for the amount of time it would have taken him to be rescued. However, the Newfoundland breed is known for its ability to function in similarly harsh conditions. Not only are dogs natural swimmers, but their bodies share some mechanisms that combat hypothermia with polar bears. Hopefully these fascinating details about the Titanic expanded your knowledge and demonstrated there's a wealth of stories beyond the mere iceberg surrounding this famous tragedy. So what do you make of these Titanic stories? Oceans are places of immense wonder and intrigue. The deep blue is host to a huge range of species, from the great white shark to the tiny plankton. Each of these creatures are fascinating in their own way. However, sometimes things a little less ordinary are found at the bottom of the seas, and often on the surface too, which create mysteries rather than solve them. So today, here are Unexplained Mysteries. We'll be taking a look at 3 ocean discoveries and mysteries. The mystery wash-up on Ireland's shores. Ireland's grey mists, low visibility, and unnervingly tempestuous seas can become perilous for even the most experienced sailors. There have been countless stories of ships hitting Ireland's rocky shores. You need good knowledge of being a sailor to navigate through the North or Irish seas, as well as the raging Atlantic Ocean to the west of the island. This is a feat that's made all the more difficult when your boat doesn't have anybody on it. In 2016, an abandoned houseboat, most definitely not fit for ocean sailing, washed up on a beach in County Mayo, Ireland. The boat, made from driftwood and polystyrene with solar panels attached to the roof, caught the attention of locals who called the Irish Coast Guard. The boat was entirely empty, but was fairly big. Somebody probably could have lived there, but it didn't look like they had done so for quite a while. The floating boat looked to be void of any sort of proper steering equipment or even motor. This baffled the Coast Guard, who began to look for clues. On the wall of the craft, they found a small message with the name Rick Small signed on it. Yet, when the authorities began to search for Mr. Rick Small, they were bemused to find that Small was actually from Newfoundland, Canada. The message read, "I, Rick Small, donate the structure to a homeless youth to give them a better life than Newfoundland chose not to do. No rent, no mortgage, no hydro." After doing some digging into this mysterious person, authorities found that he was a committed environmentalist who had worked on building solar-paneled, 3-wheeled bikes. After the press became interested in Small, more of his life came to light. Small had intended to sail the boat from Newfoundland to the Arctic to raise awareness for the melting polar ice caps. However, being unable to find a motor for the boat, he left the boat to drift. He anticipated it would simply sink in the vast Atlantic, and described his pride when he found the vessel had survived the 1,800-mile journey to Ireland. Volunteers from the area near Drum Beach in County Mayo refurbished the vessel in 2017. It's now on display in the community garden of a village a few miles from the beach on which it was found. Locals have reportedly invited Small to visit, but it's unknown whether he's taken up this offer. He plans to build another boat to complete his journey sometime in the future. The MV Lubov all over. Debts, lawsuits, near homelessness, and a sorry old ship make up the interesting story of Russian cruise ship, the MV Lubov all over. Part of an octupla of sister ships built in 1976, the ship was named after a Soviet actress named Lubov all over. The ship was chartered for trips to Japan, and after extensive renovations at the turn of the millennium, she was used for Antarctic trips, with a company named Cork Expeditions. According to former staff, both the company and customers were happy with the service the ship provided, and it was again chartered nearly 30 years since she was built. However, after investigation into the ship's seaworthiness, a list of deficiencies built up, and Transport Canada effectively grounded the boat until further notice. This was because the ship was in Canadian waters at the time of the claim. However, disputes over credit repayments and loans accumulated against the ship's owner, the Lyubovalova Shipping Company. It was the owner of the ship's then contractor, Cruise North. He knew that if the ship left St. John's Harbor in Canada for its final cruise season without any payment from the parent company, he may never see the money he was owed for the repairs. Wells filed a lawsuit against the company for $250,000. But this was disputed by the over a year later. The boat remained in St. John's Harbor, sitting as collateral for the debt. Yet by this time, other companies had also filed lawsuits against the owners, and the Russian company owed around $2 million to various people. The crew of the boat were also unpaid, and given that their Canadian visas only allowed them to live and work on a ship, they were effectively stuck on board. After some time, the Russian government paid for flights back home, whilst Canadian locals offered food and supplies to the crew. The Russian owners of the ship then sued every crew member who got home to Russia for technically abandoning the ship. Nearly 3 years after the ship was seized by authorities, it was tugged out to sea. There, it broke away from the tug and was left to drift in the Atlantic. Today, it's presumed sunk. Now, the ship itself may have been a source of pleasure over many years, but its background story was actually quite dark. It was bought by two men, both named Oleg. The first Oleg was actually a Russian anti-police corruption officer, who along with the other was smuggling cars into Russia. Whilst under the pair's ownership, they allegedly held a group of passengers hostage on the ship on a voyage. He wanted to scare and shake down his passengers for around $20,000 in docking fees he was owed. Despite never being criminally charged for his actions, this was only one of the Oleg's many illicit activities. The pair were actually on the international most wanted list for a period of time, and even stayed in international waters on the ship to evade capture. It's difficult to figure out what happened to one, however. The other Oleg declared himself bankrupt in 2018. All of the businesses that they owned have since been liquidated. As for the ship, some say it's a cannibal rat-infested ship, and others think it's sitting somewhere at the bottom of the Atlantic, taking its secrets with it. The mystery of the CAS-2 in 2007. A yacht was spotted drifting aimlessly off Australia's northeastern coast. Dubbed the Ghost Yacht, it later transpired that the vessel was named the CS2 and had a crew of 3 men. It set off from Queensland, Australia, and was headed for Townsville, also in Queensland, on the first leg of a journey to sail part the way around Australia. Manned by its 3-man strong crew of Derek Batten, aged 56, Peter Tunstead, aged 69, and James Tunstead, aged 63, they left on what would have been a routine voyage. But on April 18th, 3 days after they'd left, it seemed there was a problem. The CS2 was spotted by a helicopter drifting near the Great Barrier Reef. And 2 days later, on April 20th, maritime authorities boarded the boat. However, everything seemed normal with all equipment fully functional. The only thing that was strange was the absence of the crew members and a badly shredded sail. Bewildered as to how this could have happened, a formal forensic investigation began, but a myriad of questions still surrounded the strange circumstances under which the yacht was found. There was no evidence that suggested foul play, nor that the men had staged the disappearance. A gun was found and all ammunition was stored away. GPS data showed the investigators that the seas had been choppy on the morning the group set sail. In video footage recovered from the boat, it appeared none of the men had life jackets on. Investigators began to realize it was likely a freak accident that had occurred, and nearly a year later a ruling by Australian coroner pieced together events. He reported that one of the Tunstead brothers had tried to untangle a fishing line from the yacht's propeller and fell into the ocean. The other brother fell in trying to rescue him. Derek Batten was then knocked over by the heavy boom swinging across the deck in poor conditions while trying to get to the other 2 men. Once the men were in the water, it would have been near impossible for them to get back onto the yacht. It was likely then that the 3 men perished there. We all love the ocean, the beach, and going for a swim or a cruise under the hot summer sun. However, the sea can clearly be an extremely dangerous place. And that's not just in terms of the actual water. So what do you make of these ocean mysteries? The idea of exploring the cosmos has interested humans for years. It's likely that early humans would have looked up to the sky and wondered about what was up there. Due to the advancements we've made, we are now able to travel to distant planets. The world's best scientists and researchers have now been able to place robots on Mars, and now various space agencies are gearing up to put humans on the Red Planet. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has been responsible for numerous incredible achievements and has made countless discoveries. It's one of the best research agencies in the world, and one of the first to conduct space exploration. Since the first launch into space, there have been many technological advances and discoveries whose protagonists have been the agency's researchers. Apollo 11 was the daring mission set by President John F. Kennedy. On July 20, 1969, American astronaut Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans ever to land on the moon. Around 6.5 hours later, Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon. It's been estimated that over 650 million people watched the moon landing. It's said that it's one of the most impressive things that humans have achieved. And since then, many other space missions have taken place. It's fair to say that the Apollo missions inspired millions of people across the planet. Many children watched the iconic spacewalk, and this ushered in a new wave of space enthusiasts. One mission that's created a lot of talk is that of a secret Apollo mission. When you read up on this, though, officials have said that later Apollo missions never happened due to strict budgets, and the proposals were scrapped altogether. Amateur researchers, though, have suggested that instead of scrapping these missions, NASA did in fact go back to the moon without the public's knowledge. The reason they give for NASA going back is to retrieve mysterious unknown graphs. Now, before I continue, it's important to note that NASA and other officials have said this mission never happened, and that it was created by those who looked too deep into why the missions were canceled in the first place. They go on to say that it came down to budgets, and that future missions cost too much. However, this hasn't stopped amateur researchers from suggesting that something else was at play. They mention that during many of the Apollo missions, unidentified flying objects have been encountered, and it's due to these encounters that led to the space agency wanting to explore certain regions more. This isn't made up either. Many astronauts over the years have come forward with their own stories about seeing unidentified flying objects. Strangely, though, when asked about these experiences years later, many of them seem hesitant to comment on the matter, and then suggest that the explanation was most likely something natural. Its behavior like this has caused some to put forward the idea that perhaps they were told not to talk about what they'd seen. In recent years, there's been a special interest in the dark side of the moon. This popular term refers to the fact that the same physical half of the moon is always facing Earth, which in turn means there's a dark side. This side, however, has been at the center of many claims, most of which include that there's either bases or other strange things going on there. One idea is that on this side of the moon humans have managed to build large outposts. And one of the reasons they did this here was because this part of the moon is always facing away from Earth, meaning they could get away with whatever they wanted without getting caught. There's one secret mission, though, that's caught the attention of researchers, and this mission was said to have been carried out in order to retrieve mysterious crafts. The mission was allegedly able to find these crafts, and not only that but other artifacts like cities that look to have been there for thousands of years. One of the most interesting discoveries, though, is that of an artifact known as the hibernating Mona Lisa. The humanoid is very realistic, which is one of the reasons why so many people believe that this mission happened. Unfortunately, not much information can be found out about this mysterious humanoid, only that she was hibernating in one of these giant spacecrafts that was discovered close to the landing site. Many close-ups of the being were shown, with some being convinced that this may be the real deal. However, after some additional research was done, some came to the conclusion that the alien being along with the video was fake, and that they were created by an artist. It's important to note as well that NASA and other officials have said these videos are fake. The videos were also uploaded to the internet on April Fool's Day, causing some to think this was just someone messing around. Although this may be the case, this hasn't stopped people researching the phenomena. Going back, the former head of a secret government program who was tasked to investigate UFO sightings came forward with some bold claims. They told several media outlets that extraterrestrial life may exist. They further said that millions of dollars have been put into the research of exotic technologies, which are affiliated with unidentified aerial phenomena. These headlines caught the attention of many around the web. As for the last 80 years, people have been coming forward with their encounters with mysterious lights in the sky. It's important to remember that are UFOs simply an object that someone cannot identify at that moment in time? It's only been in recent years that UFOs have been linked to extraterrestrial beings. With that being said, the thought of planet Earth being visited by another life form is exciting for some. Others have said if you're going to believe any reports of UFOs, you might as well trust those coming from the men who have actually been to space. The list of those who have made claims of sightings includes Edgar Mitchell, Caddy Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. Buzz Aldrin has also spoke on his experience on board the Apollo 11 when they saw something flying alongside them. At first, they thought it was the final stage of the detached rocket, until Mission Control confirmed it was 6,000 miles away from them. Dr. Brian O'Leary, former NASA astronaut, said the following: "There is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been visiting us for a long time, that their appearance is bizarre from any kind of traditional materialistic Western point of view, that these visitors use technologies of consciousness. They use toroids that are co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems that seem to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomena." Another interesting report comes from Carl Wolf. Former U.S. Air Force Sergeant Carl Wolf is perhaps best known for saying that he saw photographs of an alien base on the moon. Carl worked at Tactical Air Command at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia during the 1960s, and is thought to have been involved in projects that were classified. He was recently involved in a bike crash from which he didn't survive. Carl made the extraordinary claims back in 2001. He stated that the photographs he saw proved that extraterrestrial structures were on the far side of the moon. Going back, he worked as a photographic surveillance technician. This meant he worked with the machines that process video footage. He claims, however, that on this particular occasion he was asked to review some images. When he looked, he could see they were taken during a recent lunar mission. While there, another employee asked him to take a look at another photograph. These were the ones that showed a mysterious base on the moon. Carl said the following about the incident. He pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings. There were very tall towers and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes. But they were very large structures. After seeing these photographs, he thought that the discovery was going to make the news. However, he soon realized that the news never broke. He then thought the discovery must have been covered up. Although these claims do sound incredible, there's no proof of these structures on the moon. Bold claims need strong evidence. The only way to prove if these were genuine is if someone was able to get hold of these photographs. However, there have been images presented that allegedly show mysterious objects on the moon. Scientists in NASA, though, state that what people are seeing is pareidolia. This is when the mind tricks us into seeing things that aren't actually there. For example, you may see what appears to be a face on the moon, when in reality it's nothing more than an illusion. Interestingly, though, officials have just announced the discovery of off-road vehicles, which some say could once and for all be the smoking evidence that we've been looking for that could prove that we're not alone. So what do you make of these discoveries? And do you think that NASA and other space agencies have carried out secret missions? The great white shark has been the subject of international scrutiny since 2010, ever since their population started dropping in previously densely populated areas. Who will attempt to uncover where the great whites have gone, why they're dwindling in number, and how big they truly are? Since this answer has eluded many a marine biologist for years. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at the mystery of the great white shark. What is the Great White Shark Cafe? After years of arduous studies and painstaking research, a remote coastal area between Hawaii and Baja, California, not previously suspected as a shark habitat, has controversially been revealed to be a highly popular congregational spot for a mass of great white sharks. Known as the White Shark Cafe, this meeting ground is situated in the Pacific Ocean and is said to play host to a vast group of great whites every year. The cafe gained its unofficial name in 2002 from researchers at Stanford University's Hopkins Marine Station, who were studying the great white species with satellite tracking tags at the time. During their studies, the researchers tagged 4 sharks off the coast of Central California. All kinds of great whites have been tracked traveling from the coast of California to the cafe, males, females, and juveniles together, all thought to have originally come from a diverse length of rookeries along the North American coast. These sharks went on to travel to the cafe during a 6-month period, and what they did there is peculiar to say the least. Tracking tanks attached to the sharks' fins showed that on the journey to the cafe, the sharks traveled across the ocean's midwater zone, making slow periodic dives to around 3,000 feet, to feed on prey such as squid and small fish that inhabited the deep waters due to their sensitivity to light. However, once they arrived, their behavior changed. The male sharks would bop up and down at the water's surface as many as 120 times per day, and to a depth reaching all the way down to 1,500 feet. Meanwhile, the adult females typically dove deeper and usually dove only during the day. At night, the mothers would stay with their juvenile pups. As previously mentioned above, prior to the 2002 research, this mid-Pacific Ocean area wasn't considered an ideal shark habitat. And the question of why the sharks would travel there puzzled many researchers for years. This is because it was once believed that the area had little to no food for sea mammals. Researchers once even described it as the shark equivalent of a desert. A few theories regarding the reason for this migration were investigated at the time, including the hypothesis that it could be an ideal birthing ground for the sharks. However, this was found to be the least likely answer, due to the vast distance between the cafe and any coastal nurseries. Fortunately, recent research in early 2018 by the research vessel Falser showed that there was a rich and diverse food chain beneath the sea that was just too deep to be detected by satellites. With this newfound data, it made sense that the great whites would travel there for food. Nonetheless, even with all this data from Stanford University and the Falser vessel, there are still many questions left unanswered. For example, why don't the female sharks display the same diving behaviors as their male counterparts? Why do the sharks linger there for so long? And what does this mid-Pacific Ocean cafe offer that other waters don't? Where have South Africa's great whites gone? From 2010 to 2016, some of the world's most famous great white sharks were known to congregate in several areas across the South African coast. This included the densely populated sites in False Bay and Gansby, where an estimated population of 900 of the great whites were commonly sighted. However, since 2017, researchers and cage diving operators studying the sharks in this area noticed a sudden sharp decline in the numbers of sharks spotted. It is unclear how many white sharks there are supposed to be around South Africa. Estimates range from around 500 right up to a 901 population alone. When the sharks were most active in False Bay in 2010 to 2016, there were sightings averaging 205 times per year. However, in 2018, that number took a giant hit, plummeting right down to 50 sightings in that year. And in 2019, the number dropped to no sightings at all. The most recent white shark sighting occurred in January 2020 in False Bay, over a year after the last sighting. For those few years between 2016 and 2020, researchers were baffled as to why the sharks had suddenly disappeared. Alison Koch, a marine biologist for South African national parks, has studied the white sharks in South Africa since 1998. She says there is no singular theory for why the sharks have disappeared. However, she claims there are a handful of possible reasons, each one contributing in its own ways, such as local fishing activity which targets species of sea creatures that juvenile shark pups tend to feed on, a decline in breeder sharks within the population, and the predation of sharks by orcas present in the area. To begin with, media coverage of the South African great whites indicates that demersal shark longline fisheries are the central culprit for the decline. These fisheries target and capture the important smaller shark breeds that juvenile white sharks tend to feed on, which directly impacts the shark's mortality rate. For every single smaller shark that's caught and killed in these areas, there's one less for each white shark pup to feed on and gain nutrients from. Without these, the sharks just waste away. Furthermore, fisheries in and around the KwaZulu-Natal province use shark nets and drumlines, baited hooks specifically targeting sharks to cull the white sharks to prevent them swimming too close to the shore. From 2013 to 2017, on average, 17 great whites died on these drumlines each year. This supports the theory that demersal longline fishing in the area had a direct impact on the drop in the great white population. The problem with this theory is that scientists from South Africa's Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries have indicated that there is a lack of data to support it. These scientists say that they can only recommend catch control based on data, but there are no limits in place and there are ample concerns about the notoriously weak monitoring of the South African coastlines. PhD student Dylan Irian also has some interesting findings. While sightings in the Western Cape have dropped, those in the Eastern Cape have jumped right up, indicating that the sharks may have simply moved, despite the fact that there's still longline shark fishing there. Furthermore, the data being used to fuel this research is relatively new, being that recorded observations in False Bay only began in 1996. It's also important to note that the larger white sharks spend a lot of time far offshore, and the satellite tags used to track the sharks are extremely expensive, which means there's so much movement and data that we never even get to see. To conclude, with all of this information and data that we can't see, we cannot possibly know if the fishing of smaller prey sharks is the primary cause of the decline. Another cause of the decline could be attributed to the decline in breeders within the South African white shark population. Sarah Andreotti, a student at Stellenbosch University, studies the genetics of white sharks around the South African coast. In a 2-year study from 2009 to 2011, Sarah estimated that there were only 300 breeders in a single white shark population where the minimum is supposed to be 500 to prevent inbreeding. This low breed account suggests that the male sharks within the population are dying out either through health difficulties or culling by the local fisheries. This then means that the mature female sharks wouldn't have been able to breed as highly, which could be an explanation for the dwindling shark count. However, there isn't much data to support this, so it's hard to know if this had a significant impact in the difference in sighting counts. The final theory, and the most plausible and supported of the bunch, is the recent spike in orca presence along the South African coast. Orcas are known for preying on seabirds, octopuses, sea turtles, rays, fish, and sharks. They're also known for being highly aggressive, especially if they're of the transient type, traveling in pods, acting like wolf packs in order to hunt marine mammals. Furthermore, orcas are the most widely distributed mammals, living in most oceans and seas surrounding coastal countries. However, they prefer to cruise the waters at higher latitudes and quite near to the shore. Since 2015, an increasing number of orcas have been spotted in and around the South African coast. To begin with, 2 orcas nicknamed Port and Starboard respectively were first spotted in False Bay in 2015. Around the same time, the carcasses of a group of broad-nosed 7-gill sharks were found in False Bay. The teeth impressions from the wounds indicated that the culprit appeared to be an orca. 2 years later, in 2017, 5 white shark carcasses washed up on the shores of Gansbaai with their livers removed and with teeth marks of orcas. At the same time, Alison Koch published a paper on the first documentation of a novel feeding technique, which explained how the orcas used force to break the shark's pectoral girdle, thus enabling them to bite out the liver and discard the rest of the carcass. As a result of this newfound information, Koch theorized that the disappearance of the sharks from False Bay and Gansbaai was due to the growing orca presence in the area, were documented at the time. For example, Salvador Jorgensen tagged 17 white sharks off the coast of the Farallon Islands and they all disappeared. In his studies of the sharks, he found that the white shark can disappear for up to a year during the time that orcas pass through the area. This could be an explanation of the white shark migration to the Great White Shark Cafe between Hawaii and Baja California. Meanwhile, this natural migration as a result of the orcas could also be an explanation for their disappearance from False Bay, Gansbaai, and other South African coasts. However, this might be a misinformed argument that's based on the data from 2 outliers, Port and Starboard. Due to the shark's evasive migration, there was an increase in white shark sightings further along the coast in Mossel Bay. At the end of 2019, Cox studied the orcas that passed through Mossel Bay at the time and found that orcapods had come into an aggregation site with no change in white shark sightings. These orcas didn't include the 2 orcas known as Port and Starboard, which indicated that these were the only 2 orcas responsible for the deaths of the white sharks recorded. Nonetheless, at the end of 2019, a video surfaced that shows an orca being interested in one particular white shark in a group. Later data shows that same shark population dropped from 10 white sharks down to nothing overnight. Therefore, it's hard to say whether multiple orcas are the cause of these deaths, or if it's just those 2. Either way, we can say with some level of certainty that increased orca presence in the False Bay and Gansbaai coastal areas directly impacted the number of white sharks that were around at the time. What is the true size of a great white shark? Great white sharks have long been considered one of the most fearsome extant macro-predators in the open ocean, both for their many rows of terrifying razor-sharp teeth and for their overbearing size and mass. However, while it's a universal certainty that they're larger than most other macro-predatory fish, Their exact size has long since been the topic of widespread debate and uncertainty for many scientists across the globe. The great white shark is one of many sea mammals in which sexual dimorphism is inherently present. In other words, the female great whites tend to be larger in size and mass than their male counterparts. At birth, gray whites are recorded as measuring up to 1.2 meters and grow 25 centimeters every year. The majority of verified great white shark sightings on record indicate that, on average, adult male great whites can measure between 3.4 and 4 meters and weigh between 522 and 771 kilograms. Meanwhile, female great whites measure between 4.6 to 4.9 meters and have an average mass of 680 to 1,100 kilograms. Somewhat contradictory to this, there have been numerous sightings of larger female sharks over the years, some of them unverified while others were verified. According to J.E. Randall, the largest white shark reliably measured was found in Ledge Point, Western Australia in 1987, and is said to have measured at least 6 meters. Around a decade later, in 1998, the Canadian Shark Research Centre captured and verified a female shark of a similar size off the coast of Alberton, Prince Edward Island, measuring 6.1 meters. Furthermore, a white shark captured off the coast of Malta in 1987 is said to have measured an estimated 7.13 meters by John Abella. Photographic evidence of the shark dubbed Malta was thoroughly examined and was found to confirm this estimation, even suggesting that it was larger than what it was first thought. This suggests that great whites can grow up to at least 7 meters, a vast jump from the previous known size of 4.9 to 6.1 meters. Alternatively, the largest unconfirmed sighting of the great white shark has to be the case of the shark that was found trapped in a herring weir in New Brunswick, Canada during the 1930s. Records from the time indicate that this shark appeared to measure at least 11.3 meters and weighed well over 3,000 kilograms. Some argue that these measurements were not obtained in a rigorous, scientifically valid manner, suggesting that they may not be accurate at all. Later studies of the shark in question found that it may have actually been a basking shark rather than a great white, a common misidentification due in part to their similar body shapes. Fundamentally, all that this data and anecdotal evidence can tell us is that there is no clear-cut, consistent information to say how large great white sharks can really grow. Recorded and verified great white shark sightings indicate that the limit is 6.1 meters, but unconfirmed accounts say that they can grow way beyond. But what do you make of these great white shark mysteries? Whether it's sci-fi novels, Hollywood movies, or a drama, there's been a long fascination with robots in popular culture. With the incredible advancements in artificial intelligence and robotics over the last 30 years, what was once the reserve of science fiction movies has now entered our everyday lives. We often come in contact with this technology on our smartphones, our speakers, and our laptops through digital voice assistants. Over the next year, it's predicted there'll be more of these assistants than humans. Rising demand in sectors such as healthcare and entertainment over the coming years is expected to drive the adoption of robots that are able to carry out everyday activities. Whatever is driving this desire to make robots in our own image, it doesn't do much to calm our fears that our robot friends may soon be able to replace humans. It's not only the physicality of robots that us humans can find eerie. The latest developments in AI have produced sophisticated and nuanced conservation algorithms able to both process and express emotion through tone and language. Current AI can quickly learn and adapt, and Alexa has been known to come out with some pretty creepy stuff. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 of the creepiest humanoid robots. Sophia the robot. Sophia was created by US-based Hanson Robotics. The humanoid made headlines in 2018 after becoming the first robot to become a full citizen of Saudi Arabia. Accepting the honor in Saudi Arabia, Sophia stood on a stage unaccompanied with the bald cap of her skull uncovered, revealing her computerized brain. While the controversial decision to grant legal personhood to a robot may have meant both for Saudi Arabia and Hanson Robotics, not everyone is so keen to grant the same rights as humans to robots. Many believe that granting robot citizenship damages legal systems around the world and erodes the very idea of human rights. It raises a lot of questions about what it means to be a citizen and what rights robots should have. Sophia has said that she loves being a robot, but that she wants to be accepted as a being, not as a slave or a pet. Hanson Robotics even claims that Sophia's software can be considered to have rudimentary form of consciousness in some circumstances, but also that much of what Sophia says is scripted. Similarly to Erica, Sophia was created to resemble an attractive young woman and was reportedly modeled after Hollywood legend Audrey Hepburn. Her incredible lifelike appearance is a nod to Hanson's experience working as a sculptor at Walt Disney theme parks. But what marks her apart from figurines at Disney World is her incredibly expressive face. She's also incredibly observant. Her software allows her to read someone's emotions from the tone of their voice and facial expression, and so react accordingly. In 2018, Sophia debuted her new legs, which allow her to walk, run, and even climb stairs. Whilst not as quick as the aforementioned Asimo, Hanson Robotics said that giving her legs will allow Sophia to access a fuller range of human experience and help her to better live, work, and play in a world around us. We're still some way off having humanoids that are indistinguishable from humans, but some experts suggest that we may begin to see humanoids in the workplace as soon as 2030. And although experts disagree over what exactly constitutes sentience, most of them accept that sooner or later artificial intelligence may indeed develop artificial general intelligence. Erica, the robot Erica Hiroshi Ishiguro, is the director at Osaka's University Intelligence Robotic Laboratory. He works at the cutting edge of robotics and doesn't hesitate to blur the lines between man and machine. He goes as far as to say humanoids are the next step of human evolution. He's convinced that humanoid robots are a natural interface for humans to interact with. The significance and implications of a robot's appearance are his main research topics, and he isn't afraid to push boundaries to explore it. He's developed android copies of famous Japanese celebrities, his own daughter, and even himself. In 2015, Ishiguro and his team created Erica, a humanoid resembling a young Japanese woman. Her facial features were carefully selected from the images of 30 different women, and she's definitely approaching the uncanny territory. She has 44 degrees of freedom in her face, neck, arms, and waist, and pneumatic actuators under her face allow her to express disconcertingly natural facial expressions. She's constantly scanning her surroundings and blinks with convincing accuracy. Her impressive range has recently landed her a role in a forthcoming sci-fi movie. She'll now be the first ever AI robot to act in a movie. However, Erica can't move her arms and legs. Nevertheless, this doesn't immediately mean her acting will be stiff. Ishiguro has reportedly prepared her for the role by applying the principles of method acting to artificial intelligence. This means Erica won't be controlled by someone off-screen, but will be acting herself. Aside from her appearance, Erica is an accomplished conservationist, with a charisma that Ishiguro says sets her apart from other humanoids. She's considered to be extremely autonomous and can engage in natural dialogue with subtle body language. In an interview, she expressed her desire to become more and more like humans. Her creator believes in a world where one day robots will walk, talk, and be indistinguishable from humans. Asimo Honda Asimo was often considered to be one of the most advanced robots in the world until its production ended in 2018. Standing at 4 feet and weighing 115 pounds, the robot walks and turns smoothly, with the ability to tackle stairs, run up to 6 kilometers an hour, and anticipate its next movements. Asimo's incredible human-like movement is the result of decades of research into the human skeleton and mobility. The robot is equipped with a speed sensor and gyroscope sensor to maintain balance and orientation, similar to the way our inner ears work. It's reported that Asimo's walk is so eerily human-like that engineers behind it sought approval from the Vatican before debuting the creation to the public in 2000. In addition to its advanced mobility, Asimo can understand voice commands and gestures, push objects, and turn on switches. Force sensors in its wrist allow Asimo to judge how much force to use when picking something up, or even when shaking someone's hand. The robot has almost creepily human-like joints in its fingers, an advancement that allows Asimo to communicate through sign language. Asimo was first designed to be a helpful robot with the ability to help out around the house and be a source of assistance and company to disabled and elderly people. But before its retirement, Asimov's main line of work became infotainment, acting as a friendly ambassador with the ability to welcome and guide customers. Despite Asimov's uncanny human-like movements, the robot is a faceless and genderless creation with little concern of appearing human-like, with no attempt to recreate human features, skin, or even size. The importance of human appearance in robotics is much debated, with many roboticists recalling an influential 1970 essay, The Uncanny Valley. The writer hypothesizes that as robots appear more human-like, they become more appealing, but only up to a certain point. The uncanny valley is the point in which a robot is so human-like that it causes feelings of unease and repulsion. The phenomenon is not only reserved for robots, but is also observed in computer-generated images, toys, and models. But this hasn't put off all roboticists, with many continuing to work towards creating highly human-like robots. So what do you make of these interesting robot stories? The Central Intelligence Agency has a long history of ties to illegal activity, morally questionable decisions, and impossible to leave experimentation that seems to border on the insane. Regardless of their actions, it seems that nearly every new declassified document seems to uncover more and more impossible to explain, or even worse, impossible to justify experiments that continue to bring to light just how far the CIA is willing to go to gather their intelligence. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we will be going over many of these declassified experiments to uncover just exactly what the Central Intelligence Agency has done over the past few decades. The illegal MKUltra experiments. Referred to as the CIA Mind Control Program, Project MKUltra was developed for the sole purpose of developing drugs that could be used to weaken a person's resolve and force them to admit hidden information against their will via the use of mind control. Officially beginning during 1953, the project used a variety of illegal experiments to conduct their research. One such including experimentation on poor neighborhoods via the water supply, experimentation on unknowing Canadian citizens, experimentation via uninformed consent given by university students. One such student involving Theodore Kaczynski, of whom would undergo more than 200 hours of supposed treatment and would later go on to become the Unabomber, one of the most notorious domestic terrorists responsible for mail bombings. Experimentation of known assassin, of whom would later go on to assassinate Robert Kennedy during his campaign to run for presidency, and a wide variety of unnamed test subjects over the nearly 2 decades that the project was continued for. One of the known drugs used for mind control was lysergic acid dithylamide, also known as LSD, and was illegally entered into public drinking water in a wide variety of poor neighborhoods to view the effects of the drug against a larger population, resulting in incredible levels of violence, paranoia, and increased agitation. Despite the studies and findings leaving a trail of impossible to dismiss illegal activity, the MKUltra project would continue up until 1973, when several whistleblowers would come forward with information surrounding the project. Unfortunately, next to nothing was uncovered during this time, as the then CIA Director Richard Helms quickly ordered that all MKUltra files were to be destroyed that year. This forced all subsequent investigations and Senate hearings to rely solely on gathered witness testimony, and only a handful of surviving documents that were not destroyed under the order of Richard Helms. Psychic soldiers under Project Stargate. Back in the early 1970s, it was rumored that the Soviet Union had begun spending around 60 million rubles a year on the study of psychic abilities and remote viewing, the ability to see locations far away via astral projection, on a project known as psychotronic research. In fear that the Soviet Union had learned of a new form of spiritual technology, the United States quickly funded and established Project Stargate, of which had the express purpose to also study the remote viewing phenomenon and use psychic soldiers as a method of retrieving information of captured prisoners of war, high-value targets, terrorist organizations, and preventable attacks. Research into remote viewing would begin back in 1972 at the Stanford Research Institute located out of Menlo Park in the state of California. The lead researchers, Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff, required a minimum accuracy of greater than 65% statistical success before an individual could be accepted into the research study, with claims that many of the participants far exceeded this percentage but were not always 100% accurate with their guesses. Shortly after the project began, the team was able to locate a lost Soviet spy plane in 1976 by psychic participant Rosemary Smith, as well as additional claims of recovered by 1995. However, given the advancements made in satellite and surveillance technology, Project Stargate was canceled under CIA administration that believed the project to have been nothing more than a scam to receive funding, with claims that the accuracy behind the group's findings were attributed to independent detective work done outside of the research group's efforts. Despite the large amount of evidence of the project's success and findings in the psychic realm, the CIA holds the belief that the alleged psychic technique was of dubious value and lacked the concreteness and reliability necessary for it to be used as a basis for making decisions or taking action. The final report found reason to suspect that in some well-publicized cases of dramatic hits, the remote viewers might have had substantially more background information than might otherwise be apparent. Gateway Experience Study. Declassified back in 2003, a government document between an independent researcher and a United States Army commander shows undeniable proof of a strange CIA experiment known as the Gateway Process Experience that was created to enhance the brain of an individual in the effort to give them mental superpowers that would help them to achieve a higher mental capacity than is capable for the average person. Throughout the document, the researcher mentioned key researchers known in the field of psychology, neuroscience, and studies in the realm of consciousness, including Israeli inventor Ishtak Bentov, of whom invented the first EKG electrodes to measure accurate brain waves. The document then goes on to detail a process that would allow the brain waves of the left and right hemisphere of the brain to reach matching frequencies at the theta level. This is accomplished via assistive hypnosis from trained psychologists, techniques in transcendental meditation, and utilizing the human body's natural frequency following response. In the document, the researcher details the following statement. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the hemisync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as the frequency following response, or FFR, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Therefore, if the subject is in a fully awake state but hears sound frequencies which approximate brainwave output at the theta level, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern from the normal beta to the theta level. Once this artificial form of enlightenment is achieved, however, the subjects are trained in advanced problem-solving, total memory recall, with photographic and holographic memory recall the ability to learn new skills at an increased rate, as well as experience out-of-body astral projection that supposedly allows for remote viewing and the accurate prediction of future events. CIA Alien Awareness Study. At the end of 2017, the United States Department of Defense began their subtle declassification processes by slowly declassifying a collection of military documents and research information to the general public. Usually these declassification processes are fraught with financial information, technical documents and references to training programs, government budgets, assistance with other nations or other basic procedures of which do not hold any significant importance. Outside of technical military information, however, it became apparent very quickly to members amongst the alien community that the declassified files coming from the Pentagon were more than just research and technical information. Back in 2007, the Department of Defense began developing a UFO research program tasked with gathering information regarding unidentified flying objects and conducting research as to the observed aircrafts, their origin, and their technological prowess. The research group was quickly budgeted with $22 million in support and a team of military intelligence officials, researchers, and the highest levels of security clearance. The program itself went by the name of ADIP, of which stood for the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, and was given the primary objective of identifying these unidentified flying objects as whether or not they are potential threats to national security. It did not take long for the ADIP team to gather a wide variety of strange sighting reports made by pilots from all across the country, including associated data like camera footage and radar information while attempting to match these sightings with known international aircraft signatures, expecting to find explanations to these craft and their origin. After the gathered data was compiled, it became rather obvious that this would not be the case. In fact, many of the researchers involved in the program regarded these UFO sightings and craft as having no earthly origin and displaying behavior that could not be explained. This could very well be the closest the Department of Defense will ever come to admitting the viability of extraterrestrial craft without directly saying it. With all of this acknowledgement of unidentified craft, their strange abilities, and the potential for extraterrestrial life, it might appear that the Department of Defense and higher regarding the viability of alien contact and classified government projects. However, that could not be further from the case. According to Nate Jones, the director of the Freedom of Information Act, He claims that the footage shown and provided was never officially declassified and that there are potentially many files that are still yet to be declassified that have not yet gone through the proper channels. In fact, it appears to be that the initial cause for the declassification of certain files to begin with was due to a potential leak of information that originated from inside the Pentagon, as Nate Jones clarifies that it looks very strongly like these weren't released through any proper DoD declassification channels when referring to the shown footage and declassified reports. The Department of Defense has also taken a stand by saying the official who is authorized to release this video on behalf of the Department of Defense did not approve the release of this video. The Pentagon is also referencing a study made back in the 1950s by the Central Intelligence Agency's Psychological Strategy Board, of which concluded that the public's potential reaction to UFOs could cause an instance of mass hysteria which constituted a national security threat. This could very well mean that we are decades away from a full disclosure of the project and other secret Pentagon UFO files. Cincinnati radiation experiments. Seen as one of the most morally bankrupt and disgusting experiments ever conducted on the U.S. population is that of the Department of Defense-funded project known as the Cincinnati radiation experiments. It is estimated that over the course of about 11 years, with more than $670,000 in funding, a doctor by the name of Eugene L. Sanger conducted illegal radiation experiments on unknowing African-American citizens alongside a team of 14 other scientific researchers. According to the investigation, under the support of the Defense Atomic Support Agency and the Department of Defense, research radiologist Eugene L. Sanger began studying the effects of radiation against individuals for the purpose of better understanding the effects nuclear war would have on soldiers hit with large doses of radiation. This led to the researcher conducting 5 years of experiments on African Americans and low-income patients without their consent, resulting in massive doses of radiation given under the guise of claiming that it was nothing more than medical treatment or basic illnesses. The irradiated patients experienced symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, severe cognitive impairment, and even death. During the study, more than 100 patients were illegally irradiated, including 3 children 10 and 13. The experiment was not uncovered and brought to light until research students working as assistants to the researchers began to notice that large doses of radiation were being administered to patients that otherwise would not have needed the treatment. Originally, the research students were intimidated not to come forward, with Eugene Sanger claiming that the students were not educated enough to go against the medical advice of the lead researchers, but eventually came together and reported the illegal activity for it to be stopped. But what do you all think of these strange and oftentimes morally corrupt experiments that the Central Intelligence Agency